therapist Kristen Jacobson.
Hey everyone, I'm Kristen, the anxiety therapist, and today I want to talk about how you can use positive self-talk to reduce anxiety immediately. So we all have that inner voice, and sometimes it's a cheerleader, but for those of us with anxiety, it tends to be a harsh inner critic. And for a lot of us, when that anxiety kicks in, that voice can go from being more neutral to being extremely harsh in seconds. And it just feeds us those negative messages that just kind of make things worse, right? They exacerbate what we're already feeling anxious about. But what if we could turn that inner voice into a more supportive one, and especially during those moments of stress? That's where this idea of positive self-talk comes in. So in this video, I'll dig into how positive self-talk can help you manage anxiety. And you'll see that it's not just about thinking happy thoughts. It's not about toxic positivity, but rather it's a skill that has solid research to back it up. And I'll give you some examples so that when you're done with this video, you can actually walk away with some actionable takeaways. So what is positive self-talk and why is it important? It's really the practice of reframing your thoughts to reduce negativity. So this is rooted in cognitive behavioral therapy, or CBT, which is an evidence-based form of therapy. Instead of being relentlessly optimistic, sort of that glass half full mentality, it focuses on giving yourself helpful, balanced perspectives. So in moments of anxiety, positive self-talk can help shift our thoughts from "I can't handle this" to "I've made it through challenging situations before." And studies show that positive self-talk can lower our cortisol levels, which is the hormone associated with stress, and it can help us handle situations with more clarity. So when we have more supportive, rational inner dialogue, our nervous system stays calmer, and this allows us to feel less anxious. And so practicing positive self-talk rewires those pathways in our brain over time, making it easier to manage anxiety naturally. And this is due to something called neuroplasticity, where this refers to our brain's ability to reshape its pathways. So with anxiety, those negative neural pathways, the ones that go to those automatic negative thoughts, those are pretty deep, right? But when we practice that positive self-talk, it starts to rewire those pathways until they become more neutralized. And so the anxiety becomes less and less. So when we talk about positive self-talk, it's helpful to understand sort of how the brain responds to anxiety and negative thoughts. When we're stressed, our amygdala, the part of our brain involved in processing fear, the part that keeps us safe and is necessary for survival, it goes into overdrive and leads to our fight or flight response. And so therefore we perceive threats more easily. So positive self-talk works by activating the prefrontal cortex. And this is the rational part of your brain. So when we focus on positive, realistic thoughts, we're actually encouraging the prefrontal cortex to stay in charge rather than letting the amygdala run the show, right? That fight or flight response. And with practice, positive self-talk can help balance these parts of the brain, reducing the intensity of that anxiety response. So positive self-talk isn't magic. It's just a technique to calm the mind, which in turn gives us more control over how we react to stressful situations. So I want to go through just some specific ways that it can help. Number one, it reduces catastrophic thinking. So anxiety often makes us jump to the worst case scenario, right? Worst possible outcome. So let's say you're waiting for test results from your doctor. You might start thinking, what if it's something life-threatening? Positive self-talk will sort of shift this perspective, and you can tell yourself, I don't know the result yet, but I'm strong enough to handle whatever it is. And this can keep your mind from spiraling, right? Because you don't have control over what the doctor is going to say, what the outcome is. So you focus more on your ability to handle the outcome. Number two, it increases self-confidence. So anxiety really erodes our self-confidence and makes us doubt ourselves and our abilities. But by repeating affirmations or more realistic positive statements like, I've done challenging things before. I can do this too. You sort of remind yourself of your strengths, and over time, this can really boost your self-confidence and reduce anxiety. Number 3, it helps break the loop of negative thoughts. So anxiety tends to trigger repetitive looping thoughts, right? If you've ever found yourself ruminating about something, like you just can't stop thinking about something, then you're very familiar with what this feels like. So it's those what ifs that won't stop. And positive self-talk can really help interrupt these loops. So for example, if you're thinking, what if I mess up this presentation? You can stop yourself by saying, even if I stumble, I'll still get my point across, and it's okay to make mistakes. Number 4, it shifts your focus to the present moment. So anxiety often pulls us into the past or the future, but positive self-talk grounds us in the present and reminds us that many of the fears we have aren't happening right now. So if you find yourself worrying about something in the future, saying, right now I'm safe and I can handle what comes when it arrives, that can help bring you back to the present. So I want to share some practical examples of positive self-talk in action. And each of these scenarios represents a different kind of anxiety that you might relate to. And I'll give some examples of how positive self-talk can help. Example 1 is social anxiety. Let's say you're going to a holiday party and your mind starts saying things like, everyone's going to think I'm boring. This kind of self-talk will only make you feel more anxious. So instead, try reframing those thoughts with statements like, most people are focused on themselves. They're not judging me as much as I think. Or I'm going to focus on connecting with just one person at a time. That feels manageable. Or I don't have to be the most outgoing person in the room in order to have a good time. By reminding yourself that social situations aren't all about being judged, you're likely to feel calmer and even enjoy yourself more. Example 2 is performance anxiety. So say you're preparing to give a presentation at work, but your mind keeps going to, I'm going to completely mess this up. Or everyone will think I'm such a fraud if you deal with imposter syndrome. These negative thoughts can make anxiety worse, causing you to stumble or forget your words. So instead, you could try saying things like, I've prepared well and I know my material. Or even if I make a mistake, people will still respect my effort. Or this is an opportunity to share what I know, not to prove myself. This kind of positive self-talk can make the situation feel less threatening and really help you stay calm during the presentation. Example 3 is health anxiety. I know a lot of people struggle with this. So let's say you're experiencing some minor symptoms like maybe a headache or a stomach ache, and you start worrying about whether it could be something serious. So health anxiety especially can easily snowball with thoughts like, what if it's something life-threatening? So in this case, positive self-talk can help keep your anxiety in check by saying things like, I'm feeling a bit off, but symptoms like this often pass on their own. Or if it persists, I can see a doctor, but right now I'll focus on allowing myself to rest and recover. Or I felt this way before and I know my body is resilient. So this approach doesn't dismiss your symptoms. It simply brings a more realistic, non-catastrophic perspective. And that's the whole point. So how do we build a positive self-talk habit? This takes time, but it's doable with consistency. So here are a few techniques that can help with that. Number 1 is to start a self-talk journal. So when you write down your negative thoughts and replace them with positive ones, then you can start to see patterns in how you talk to yourself. So maybe you'll notice that you're often most critical of yourself before big events. Then you can start to prepare phrases to counter those specific negative thoughts. Number 2 is to challenge negative thoughts with curiosity. So become aware of negative self-talk patterns and question their validity. So ask, is this thought true? Or what evidence supports this belief? Replacing those unhelpful thoughts with more balanced, constructive ones can really provide a healthier perspective and in turn reduces anxiety. Number 3 is to use affirmations to reinforce strength. So I touched on this a little bit before. Develop a set of affirmations that align with your values and strengths. So this can sound like statements like, you can handle this, or you've gotten through hard things in the past. And repeating these statements, especially during those stressful moments, can help you build that self-confidence and creates more of a resilient mindset. And when you use the word you instead of I, it sort of frames it as though you're giving yourself a pep talk. Number 4 is you want to cultivate self-compassion. So acknowledge your struggles without judgment and treat yourself with the same kindness you might offer a friend if they were going through that situation. So simple reminders like, I'm not alone in this, or I can give myself grace, will really shift your internal dialogue to one of understanding and self-support. This is a big one because a lot of the clients I work with, they really judge themselves for feeling anxious, and this just sort of exacerbates the anxiety, right? Because then there's judgment, there's guilt, there's just a lot of other stuff piled on top of the already existing anxiety. So when you practice self-compassion, it's really a game changer. So definitely try that out. Number 5 is reframing what if thoughts in a more positive way. So you want to counteract that catastrophic thinking by reframing what if scenarios. And instead of dwelling on those worst case outcomes, ask, what if things do work out? Or how will I adapt if they don't? This approach promotes more flexibility and reduces the fear of the unknown. And then finally, we want to focus on the present moment. So again, anxiety pulls us into the past or the future, but positive self-talk can ground you in the now, in the present. So saying right now I'm safe helps redirect your focus to the present and reduces the intensity of those future focused worries. So again, positive self-talk is a tool. It's not a fix. It's not a cure for anxiety. It's just one of the many tools you can use to manage it. And the key is to be realistic and compassionate and consistent. And then over time, the more you practice this positive self-talk, the more naturally it will come, and it will help to keep you grounded and calm even in challenging situations. So just keep in mind, changing how you talk to yourself isn't easy. You've had a certain inner voice for a really long time, and changing that is hard. It's a hard thing to do, but with consistency, with intention, with dedication, you really can change the way you think. I've done it myself. I've seen it happen with clients, and it does get easier with time. So just keep practicing, and you may find that your inner voice does actually become more of a friend versus a critic. So I would love to hear your experience with positive self-talk, if there are any situations in which you have found it helpful. And I hope you enjoyed this video. I will see you next week.